So, hello everybody, and welcome to another live weekly energy forecast. So, in these sessions, we have a little look at the astrological energy of the week, the energy of the moon phase, the energy of the seasons, and how they all layer on top of each other to create our experience of the week. So, this week is a little bit of a lot quieter than last week. We had some really, really significant transits. And also, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the Mars station that we had at the beginning of last week, because it became very apparent to me throughout the week how much of an impact that station had. So, if you are feeling very, very exhausted at the moment, if things have felt very busy, fast, lots happening, particularly last week, points of tension, points of heat, kind of reaching a boiling point is very, very Mars in Cancer, as I mentioned last week. So if that was an experience that you had last week, I just really want to acknowledge that, because even when I was doing that forecast, I don't think I really realized just how impactful that transit was actually going to be. Because when a planet slows down, so when we have a retrograde again, the planets are moving backwards in the sky. So planets generally move forwards, and then every now and then, depending on the planet, so with Mars, it goes retrograde once every 2 years. It then appears to stop in the sky, move backwards for a short period of time, then it stops again, and then it moves forward. Then it moves forwards in the sky. So that Mars station last week, whenever a planet stations retrograde, whenever a planet stops and moves forward, that when the planet stops, that Pam Gregory always uses this analogy, who's another astrologer who I absolutely love. I'd really check out her work if you do really like astrology. But she always describes it as like a big ship turning, and if you imagine the impact that that would have on the flow of the water, and the planet becomes way more pronounced. Now, Mars is a malefic planet. It can bring heat, it can bring sharpness, it can bring frustration, it can bring Mars is energizing, Mars is hot. It can bring accidents, it can bring it can bring inflammation, it can bring lots and lots of different things. So with it being a malefic planet on a Mars station, depending if you're a night chart baby or a day chart baby, this can also depend how you experience the transit. So if you are born at night, Mars is generally less malefic. When you're born in the day, Mars becomes a bit more malefic. And again, these are never transits that are particularly bad or trying to cause harm or doing anything that is trying to cause us difficulty just for the sake of it in any way. There's always points of tension, so that then there's growth, right? So there's always something that happens so we can then move forward. So again, I mentioned this in the update last week. Things have probably been a bit slow, like walking through muddish, not quite, or maybe extra tense potentially, not quite being able to move forward from the 6th of December. If you've been experiencing that, particularly if you're a Cancer rising, an Aries rising, or a Scorpio rising, I mentioned last week in the forecast that now is the time to move forward. Now is going to be the time where things start to flow. But actually, with that Mars station, it is a slower turning point. And what I've noticed from the people that I've spoken to this week is it just feels like that boiling point. That feels like there's a lot going on. There's a lot of chaos happening. So, with that Mars station, it's become more pronounced. We're about a week off it now, but Mars is going to be at the degree that it's stationed direct in for a little bit longer. So even though there might have been themes kind of thrown up in the air last week, things might have felt a bit tense, it's going to ease off, but it might ease off quite slowly. And I just really wanted to acknowledge that, because I feel like I didn't make enough of a point of it last week. And it felt really, really important, especially witnessing everything that I've witnessed in people's lives this week. Um, so yes, in terms of this week, things might start to feel a little bit better, particularly towards the end of the week. We've got a really nice Sun trine Mars, which I think is just going to bring a bit of positivity and energy into this situation, because Mars retrogrades, because they expel a lot of energy as well. They can leave us feeling just exhausted and defeated by the end of them, which is now, we're at the end of the retrograde now. So the fact that things are going to be able to move forward, at least when we've got that Sun trine towards the end of the week, it might energize things and just help us get going again. So that's the Mars stuff, right? We've still got lots of retrogrades coming up over the next month. So Mars, the Mars area of your life, wherever you have Cancer in your natal chart, that is going to be able to start to move forward. And really from April is where things will really kick into gear, but we're going to start to see a bit of a shift soon. But there are going to be other parts of your charts that are going to be hit by retrogrades, and we're going to get into that in a moment. So actually getting to this week, So Venus is now retrograde. We've got Mercury stationing retrograde at the end of last week, with next week. So there is a lot happening at the moment. However, this week in particular, even though March is big and loud and huge, and there's a whole lot going on, this week is a lot less dynamic than the rest of the month is. So I guess like last week we had the Mars station, we also had the Venus station retrograde. This month is quieter. This month feels not month, sorry, this week. It feels like the calm before the storm a little bit. This is also the last full week of winter because next week we're going to be not winter, sorry, the water element. So in the Chinese medicine wheel, we have five elements that guide us through the year. So there's four elements which represent four seasons, and then we have the earth element which sees us through the transition. So that comes in about a week before an equinox or a solstice and a week after. So that's when the earth element comes in. It helps us to ground, it helps us to transition. So we're in the last week, full week of watery energy, which is the part of the Chinese medicine wheel that represents the winter time. So water element energy is nourishing, it's deep, it's reflective, it's very magical. It's like what the space between death and conception, like nothingness, where things are born, where like life is sparked. So it's a very, very, very important time to deeply nourish your body and energy system. It's like in the winter, it looks like nothing's happening on the surface. Like everything goes still and quiet, everything looks dead. But underneath the earth, the root systems are expanding and gathering nutrients ready so they have the strength to burst forward in the spring. And that's really, really similar with the water element and the winter season in general for us as well as plants. So it's so important to nourish, nurture, and build that strength. This is the last full week where it's really important we do that, because if we finish the winter strong, then we enter spring strong. We're going to be entering into a week before the equinox where it's earthy and it's all about grounding, transition, getting clear, moving stagnation, and then we'll transition for another. We'll get to the equinox. We'll have another week of earth, and then we'll move into the wood element season, which is all systems go, action, driving forward. So because there's so much happening in March and April this year, particularly 2025, March and April are the biggest months astrologically that we have all year. It is really, really important that we are so well nourished to be able to handle this. It's like when your foundation is strong, then you're way more resilient. And it's not to say that March and April are going to be awful and horrible and everyone's going to suffer and life is going to be horrendous. No, that's not the case. There's just going to be a lot of very dynamic energy. There's going to be a lot of tone shifts. We've got eclipses coming. Eclipses bring drastic endings, new beginnings that can kind of suddenly come from nowhere. It can be sudden shocks, surprises. So there's just a lot happening. And when we have that strong, resilient foundation, we're much more able to navigate those periods of time effectively. So really something to be mindful of this week. So we also, even though this is a bit of a calmer week, we only have a couple of astrological transits that are important to mention. We do also have a first quarter moon. So there is an energizing aspect to this week. We've also got Mercury going into Aries, which is very energizing. And then we have that Mars trine Sun, which I feel like is an energizing aspect too. So it's not that this week is quiet and inward and still, and that's it. There is some pretty big energizing energy happening. However, it's just not going to be as dynamic as the rest of the month. So this is quite a good week to kind of take some action. What I would really, really encourage is to be active in nourishment, because there is energy there. We've got the first quarter moon. So new moons are very quiet, inward, still, reflective. It's all about setting intentions, no action, rest, right? First quarter moons are where we actually get shit done. This is where we take the action on the intentions that we set. This is where we move things forward. This is where we take assertive action on things. However, a first quarter moon in the winter is very, very different to a first quarter moon in the spring or the summer. So there's still this undertone of stillness, quiet, introspectiveness, nourishment, working with the kidney and bladder meridians in the body to make sure that they're strong, because they're the energy systems that nourish and deeply nourish our body and energy system. So when those systems are strong, then we can enter these next phases so much more effectively. So there is an energizing sense to this week. It's going to be helpful. I would really encourage you to direct at least some of that energy into rest and nourishment and taking care of yourself, building that strong foundation. It's beautiful outside at the moment. Like the energy is moving, you can feel things stirring, and that's amazing. However, it's too soon to jump off the starting blocks just yet. And it's often when we do that we then don't have the momentum. Like I mentioned, the arrow pulling back in the quiver. We need to make sure that we can fully extend that to get the most possible, like the best possible range. And so it can have the most impact. So it's exactly the same here. One more full week of just rest, nourishment, of that being a really, really important part of your day to day. And it will pay dividends throughout the next 6 months and beyond. So that was a lot. Let's actually get into the astrology. There's not loads today. Not as much as last week. Last week was a bit crazy with all those Mercury transits. But okay, so Monday, the 3rd of March, which is today, Mercury in Aries. Mercury is going to enter Aries from Pisces. So it's been in Pisces for roughly 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer because it's starting to slow down a little bit now. But this is a nice fresh change, especially as a Mercury in Aries natally. I'm quite excited about this because Mercury is in its fall in Pisces. Mercury does not like to be in Pisces. So Mercury is the planet of communication, the mind, how we form ideas and how we express those out into the world. So Mercury in Pisces, because there's no clarity and there's no structure and there's no truth or like tangibility, Mercury struggles in Pisces. However, it can be really great for creativeness. It's not to say there's ever good or bad in astrology. It just doesn't perform in the way that it would when it's in its home sign. In Aries, it's not in its home sign either. However, there is a masculine quality to Aries. There's that like energized, directional, clear, like Mercury gets shit done in Aries. It's a great day for communication. It's a great time for communication. It's very action-focused conversations, like results-driven conversations. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It begins things. So it's almost like the initiatory spark to act. Fire is all about action in astrology, in the astrological system, whereas wood would be the Chinese medicine system. So they like different languages that explain similar energies. So there's a saying with Aries energy that's like ready, shoot, aim, and that makes me laugh, but it's so perfect. It's almost like Aries is the warrior, because a warrior couldn't think. It would have to just put its head down and charge into battle. If it started to think and reason, it wouldn't have the bravery to just do it, right? Aries is just do it. So it's about acting, maybe even sometimes before thinking things through, which can be a negative expression of Aries energy. However, it will help you get off the starting blocks. It will help you push things forward, and you will feel a nice shift in tone from this dreamy, maybe a bit more like, I don't know what I'm doing. Everything feels a little bit weird, into, okay, I'm going to do that thing. I've got an urge. I'm going to act on it. So again, big tone shift. Mercury will station retrograde in a few weeks though. So generally, Mercury moving into Aries without a retrograde season would just bring get shit done, like do loads of stuff, move things forward. However, and maybe like clarity of mind, clear and directional, just knowing what you're doing and how to get there. However, with Mercury stationing in a couple of weeks, there is this sense of what comes up now is important. Take action, move forward, especially if it feels right. Just be prepared that this may come back around at some point. So basically, Mercury's in its pre-retrograde shadow. So it's passing over the degree points that it's then going to go backwards over again in a couple of weeks. So when that happens, we're kind of already in territory that's going to be travel back over and then travel back over again when it moves forward again. So generally, when we have 3 passes of something, it's going to bring something up, then we're going to go back and have to redo something, and then we can finally move forward. So that's the kind of energy that could be happening. So again, not a bad thing. There's always opportunities for review and reflection. That's how we make things better. That's not a bad thing. However, it's just something to be mindful of. Like if you're doing something now, it doesn't mean that this is going to be the thing and that's it. There may be something that we have to revisit at some point. So just be prepared for that and be mindful of that. So then Wednesday, the 5th of March, we have Mercury in Aries sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. So Mercury is moving into Aries, it's energized, it's feeling clear and directional. And then when it makes a sextile with Pluto, Pluto is the planet of transformation, it's the planet of power. And sextiles are beneficial aspects in astrology. They're supportive. Not as beneficial as a trine. Trines are way more beneficial because there's more harmony and more flow. However, there's still support happening there, and they still understand each other, and they're still friends. they're like acquaintances. So this can be powerful conversations. Like I could see Pluto really energizing that already energized Mercury there. So this can be powerful words. Great time to announce things. Again, though, we still have that retrograde coming up, so just be mindful of that. This energizes an already energized Mercury, and it's words that have impact to change and transform. So again, a great day for conversations, great day to put stuff out, great day for even to have a conversation with somebody, like maybe you've not been able to move forward in a relationship or something. That day would be an absolutely fantastic day to have a conversation and just get things out and on the table so we can actually make the change that's needed and move forward. However, just watch this. Pluto is also power plays. So sometimes out of balance, Pluto can manifest. With this being a sextile, I'm less worried. If it was a square, I would be telling you to be a bit more really, really conscious of the conversations you're having. Try not to kind of step on somebody and make them small, I guess. Something to be mindful of, maybe just going in too hard, and maybe kind of being mindful of the fact maybe there's power plays happening. Just be aware. Again, not super concerned with this being a beneficial transit, but just something to be mindful of. And then finally for this week, we have actually, sorry, just circling back to that. So we are going to have 3 passes, as I mentioned, because Mercury is in Aries, it's going to be traveling back over this degree point. Pluto moves really slowly, so it will actually retrograde, make the sextile again, and then make the sextile again when it finally moves forward completely. So again, around Wednesday, particularly if you're noticing themes of that transit happening, be aware this might come back. And it might become a theme again, and it might be something that is really important for you to pay attention to in the future. So just be aware of that. That it might not be done yet, or actually just beginning a process that's going to take a little bit longer, maybe more like 6 weeks, than opposed to having a conversation moving forward and then everything's done. Okay, so Saturday, the 8th of March, the final transit of the week, we have the Sun in Pisces trining Mars, and this is just going to give us a little bit of a breather after what was pretty brutal last week. So Mars transits in general can be challenging, particularly the Cancer risings in my life have had a rough time. So I do see that this has been a challenging period of time for people. Again, not always. It can just bring friction, it can bring tension, but it's always for growth, right? It's always important. It brings things to the surface. Like if you think about it, like bringing heat to a situation, it almost makes it, I guess, like impossible not to address. It brings things to the surface that maybe you weren't addressing, particularly in Cancer as well, because Cancer is so avoidant. Cancer kind of likes to scuttle to the side and not actually address problems head on. Mars likes to address problems head on. So there's probably been tension around those themes, maybe in your relationships, maybe at work, maybe in your career, maybe just like, actually needing to attack things head on rather than just kind of avoiding. So there will have been some sort of journey around that. That has come to a close. However, it's almost like, I don't know why I want to describe it like this, but it's almost like someone's poking you really hard. Like that Mars station is always like, right, I'm stationing and I'm stationing and I'm stationing and I'm still here, even though I'm tiny, I'm moving forward, and then we can move on. So it does have that kind of feeling to it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's just what keeps coming to mind. So this is a positive and energizing transit. So we've had the stickiness, we've had the difficulty, and now we're edging forward, and then we get a really nice energizing trine from the Sun on Saturday. So it's a positive energizing transit. There's something that may have been loud or uncomfortable or exhausting for a while, and there might just be some sort of a feeling of resolution, a feeling of like, now I can move forward. Okay, like I get it now. Or maybe just a sense of like softness and ease, because the Sun is in Pisces as well. Pisces is soft and compassionate and gentle and dreamy and caring, right? So like a trine from the Sun in Pisces is like just a lovely kiss from a really nice mom or something like that. And it supports the flow of emotion, and it's like it's energizing this situation where maybe you kind of feel like you're a little bit out of energy and just exhausted. It might bring a moment of understanding and clarity of how to move forward as well, just because the Sun illuminates. So that can sometimes just help us to understand maybe what this journey is about. And there's been a few points of this throughout the retrograde, but because this is almost like the final transit where it's at this 70 degrees point that feels significant, and then it's going to move forward, it does feel important. It does feel like a point where it's like, okay, now we're going to take the steps. And it doesn't mean that everything's going to be plain sailing from now onwards. However, it will mean that we can start to edge forward, and it's going to bring a bit of levity to the situation. Um, it might add energy as well. The sun energizes because it's vibrant and it gives life to the rest of the universe, or at least Earth. But it gives life, right? It's the giver of life. So it might add energy for you to take steps in the right direction. Mars is action, the sun energizes. So those two together supporting each other gives me, and Mars now moving forwards, taking steps in the right direction feels like the best description of that energy. And it could be a glimpse of what's to come as well, because as I've mentioned, this Mars retrograde has been challenging, but we are getting that Jupiter transit through Cancer, where this Mars retrograde has been happening in June. So Mars kicked up a bunch of dust, but we're gonna see the gifts of things we've taken responsibility for when it comes around to June. So this transit to me almost gives me an inkling of like what's to come, like what. So if good things happen on this day, if something happens, there's like harmony, or maybe there's like an idea that forms, then Jupiter's going to come back over this point and kind of clean things up and bring luck, optimism, growth, expansion. So there's potential here for this to start feeling really good. Again, the pace might pick up quite slowly because Mars is still going to be at that 17-degree point where it stopped for a little while longer. So that is pretty much all I wanted to cover for this week. For those guys who are on the membership, we have some really, really nice exercises coming to you this way. So in our new moon coaching call last week, we went into the unfettered authentic you, talked about, your intrinsic core drivers and how to use those to fuel your goals and move forward. So that's our theme for the month. And this week we've got a really amazing workshop coming, which has got some incredibly powerful questions for you to really understand and connect with that core self, and some really lovely practices for you to get quiet and still, and some somatics to really connect with that core, especially with those last bits of winter energy, and especially preparing to then move forward into the season of action. It's great groundwork to lay throughout this next couple of weeks just before the equinox. So that's coming this week. We've also, I'm going to recommend a couple of classes as well. Just the last week of supporting kidney and bladder, if we can really take responsibility with just some of those energy practices, even if you can just do, 5 minutes in the morning, pick a couple of the meridian traces out of one of the sessions, or you can do a bit of a longer session over the weekend, moving energy session, a kidney and bladder meridian yoga session, something like that. Like, I think working with this water element now is really going to be so beneficial. So I've got a few practices lined up for you guys on that, as well as those journal prompts, which are really going to help you get deep and connect with that core self. And there's a really beautiful meditation that we did as well. So I'll pop that down below. But I think that's all I wanted to touch on this week. So stay grounded. Just be aware that Venus retrograde is happening as well. I did talk about it more in the last session, but it did only station retrograde on the 1st of March. So we're still fresh in that Venus station, bringing up themes from 2017, like what are you integrating, what's changed since then. It might start to bring up some themes. Again, a Venus retrograde is not going to be as sticky as a Mars retrograde, so don't worry, don't panic. But we are still in a period of review. That Mars part of your chart will start to move forward, but the Aries part of your chart, Mars, I keep saying Mars, the Cancer area of your life is going to start to be able to move forward. However, the Aries area of life, where we're getting the Venus and the Mars retrograde, there's still going to be a period of review before we can then actually move forward, which will come with towards the end of the spring going into the summer. So I'll talk more about Venus retrograde stuff next week. We'll get into that a little bit more as we're like more in full swing of it. But I hope you have a wonderful week. Keep me updated as well, because the conversations I had around Mars retrograde last week were just so incredibly helpful, and they really helped me to address things really well in these readings. So, if you do notice anything, if something really resonates, if you have an experience that really aligns with any of these transits that I'm talking about, please do let me know. It's just really, really helpful. And if you have any questions as well, I can also do videos and answer those questions. If you need to find a degree point in your chart, if you want to know more about a specific planet or placement, like get in touch with me and I can create content based around those things. So lots of love, and I will see you all in the next video.